Okay, the next topic is form elements, or we can call it as form tags. Okay, so in that the first one is input tag. So basically input tag will be used to read input from the end user. So there are different types of inputs available. So let us see one by one. I am going to generate this HTML structure, and here I am going to use input. So as I mentioned, there are several types of inputs are available. So by default, whenever we are not mentioning also, so at that time, so system will prefer it as text type. So input type is equal to text, where it is going to allow user to enter any number of characters. So it can take alphanumeric characters. Okay, so let us run this. Now you can see this is an input element where users can enter some text inside it. So since we mentioned it as text, it is exactly similar to our string data type in our programming languages. So where users are allowed to enter numeric characters and as well as alphabets also. So in a page we can create forms with a number of input tags, right? So at that time, so we need to be have a clarity that so which input is giving what value. So to get that segregation, so we are going to write, so either we can write like this, so this input is for what, and to identify which element is posting the value, so here we are going to use two attributes. One is name, another one is id. So in a form, name can be duplicated, but id attribute is need to be unique and it should not get duplicate with any other element. So now if you are going to refresh this, it looks like this. So this previous whatever the text that we have, that is going to give you an information that so this input is for what option. Okay, so second one, so similarly I am going to create another one. So if we are asking user to enter password, so at that time, so we are going to take input, so type is equal to, so we'll mention the type as password. So again you have to enter some name, so name is some pwd, id is also pwd something. So suppose if you are not going to pass any name or id attribute, browser won't throw any error. Okay, so but at the time of submission, so whenever you click on submit button, so at that time, so we'll get confused which input is for what. Okay, so that is the reason we need to maintain name and id for every HTML element, but especially for form elements it is mandatory. Okay, so now if you see the output, it is going to be like this. Now if you observe the differences between so normal text input and password input, so it is also going to be like exactly similar when you are a developer. So while operating it, you don't find any changes here. So but from user perspective, so this is not going to be visible to the end user. Okay, so that is what the password tag. Next, so in recently in HTML5 version, so we got some new types other than this text and password, especially for the input tag. So that is what number. So you can see this input type equals to number. So we can pass id and name. So I am skipping this id and name. So while you are doing it, you have to mention them. Okay, so I am just demonstrating it like this. So the advantage over this input type number is where users are allowed to enter only numerics. So suppose if I am going to type any alphabets, it's not going to allow you. So only option is users can enter this particular numeric characters, and this can be incremented, this can be decremented by using these two buttons here. So that is the advantage of input type is equals to number. Next, in HTML5 version itself, so we got one more option. So suppose for reading quantity or volume, zoom size, for these kind of factors we can use the input type is equals to range. So here you can mention what is the minimum value. Minimum is 0 and maximum is 100 or 10 or whatever the value that you are expecting that user can select, you can offer that. So here you can see you are going to get a track bar. This can be called technically a track bar. So where you can also assign what is the default size. Suppose if I refresh the page, you can see this is going to be exactly center of whatever the value that you have. So this is also can be managed, so by passing a value attribute here. So suppose if I am going to pass value 0, by default this is going to be at value 0 itself. Users are going to be selecting. So the problem over this particular track bar is whatever the value that we are going to select, that is not going to visible to the user with HTML. So while using the JavaScript, that we can display at side or somewhere. So but with plain HTML, it is not going to be possible to display what is the value that users are currently selecting. That's a problem. And next one is color option. So input type equal to color. So for this you can see a pop-up button like this. Whenever you click on this, you can able to see a pop-up window. So where they can select the first what is the major color. After that they can select the contrast and so how much dark it is required. After that, whenever you submit this to any of the server or web page, so the selected color code is going to be submitted. So that is what we can call input type is equals to color. Next, additionally, so we have email. So for reading email address, so we are going to use input type is equal to email. Input type is equal to email. So you won't find any difference of using it without a form tag and button. So let me show you this use of this email. I am going to surround all these tags with form tag. Why? Because these are all form elements only. So now inside this I am going to create a button. So there are two types of buttons are there. So predefined and user defined. Okay. So here we are going to mention input type equal to reset, and after that so we are going to mention a button input type is equal to submit. So these two are predefined buttons here. Okay. So now you can see this. Whenever you click on, if you type something and if you click on submit, if it is not in a valid email format, it is going to throw an error like this. Okay, it will display an error like this. So please include an iterate. So suppose ABCD @ again if you submit, it is going to be say that it is going to be incomplete email address. So then we can mention @gmail.com. So then it is going to be submitted. So this is the advantage. So whenever you are going to use input type is equal to email. And one more thing, so whenever we are working with HTML5 attributes, so in case if you feel if any input is mandatory, users should not skip that value. Suppose user need to enter this name field as mandatory, so then we can mention it as required. Okay. So now let's see the advantage over here. Whenever you click on submit button, it will display this as please fill out this field. Okay. So then users cannot skip that particular column. Okay. So this required attribute, so will ask user to enter at least one character inside the mentioned input tag. So that is the advantage of this required attribute. And there is one more option is there. We can also write regular expression. So normally we have seen regular expressions in .NET or JavaScript. So the same thing can be done with HTML elements also. So suppose I am going to ask user to input the mobile number. So then we are going to mention input type equal to text. Okay, so and ID and name will be there, that is mandatory. Suppose for example, so user should suppose to enter mobile number where the first digit either it can be a 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. So at that scenario, so we need to write a regular expression. So now you can see we are going to write an attribute called pattern. Always regular expressions are going to start with cap symbol and ends with a dollar symbol. So in between we are going to write a regular expression. So if you want first digit from between 6 to 9, we require one character, and remaining characters is a combination of 0 to 9, and so total 10 digits it is going to be. So now you can see this, and I am going to apply this required attribute also for the mobile number field. So after that, let me add a break tag. So now if you refresh here, it will be like this. If you click on this, so first it will ask for name, then if again it is going to ask for mobile number. So suppose if I am going to give like this, so it will say that please match the requested format. So whenever you are going to give the number in proper expected format, so then your error will be cleared off. Okay, and in case if you want to write your own error message, then you are going to write title equal to incorrect mobile number. This title attribute is going to be printed whenever your pattern is not matching with the entered input. So it will be like this, and if I am going to submit, so incorrect mobile number, this message will be displayed. So whenever it matches with the pattern, at that time that is going to be skipped. So these are the input element properties. Okay. Any queries?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So we can see some more properties relevant to any of the HTML element, but most probably will use for input element. Okay. So though it is a mobile number, maybe I wrote the regular expression to validate. So still I can enter more than 10 characters, right? So if I want to restrict user to enter only some certain number of characters, so at that time, so we can use an attribute called max length. So suppose if I am going to fix for 10, so then user can enter only 10 characters. That doesn't mind whether it is as per mobile number format or not. Okay, so users, they can enter max of 10 characters. That's it. Even though after if we are typing, so it's not going to allow user to enter more number of characters other than whatever we have mentioned. So since we are mentioning max length equal to 10, so it will allow max of 10 characters only. So see, immediately we'll get a thought that, so since we have max, so do we have any minimum length or not? No, we don't have any minimum length. So minimum length or any, if you have any other logics that need to be mentioned as per the pattern. So we cannot restrict the user to enter what are the minimum characters. Okay. Next one, suppose if I want to ask user to enter nationality, so then we can take input type equal to text is there. So here, so whenever it is loaded in the browser, so almost if we are offering the same input form for the Indians, everybody will type it as Indian only, right? So at that time, so I want to save the user time instead of typing the same value again and again. So then you can pass an attribute called value. So here if you are going to mention it as Indian, so at the time of loading this form in the browser, so by default they can able to see this value. Okay, so value is the attribute. so where that is going to be displayed to the end user. This is one option. Suppose if you don't want allowed user to modify this value, so it should be Indian only. So at that time, so you can use an attribute called read only. So if you are going to mention it as read only, so now you can see this, you cannot modify that value. Users, they cannot modify that value. But so there will be one possibility is there. So if users are developers like us, they can right click and go to this inspect option. So here read only property will be there, right? So they can modify this and they can modify the value. This is a drawback of this, but still you can restrict the user. Okay, and if you don't want user to at least to select or type or something, or else if you don't want to submit this data to server, so then you can add an attribute called disabled. So that means this entire field will be disabled and this data is not going to send to the server whenever you click on submit button. So whenever if any input element or any HTML tag is disabled, so that is not going to be submitted to the server whenever you click on submit. So form is going to ignore that particular input element. Okay, is it clear as of? Any questions?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Next up, suppose if I want to ask user to upload his resume or photograph or any document or something, at that time we can use input type is equal to file. Input type equal to file. So then it is going to give you an option where users can click and upload a file. They can click and upload a file like this. So for that, so we are going to use input type equal to file. Suppose if user want to select any one option among a list, so then we are going to use, that is also input element, that can be called as radio button. So we are going to write input type equal to radio. Input type equal to radio. Then you can see there is a circle where user can select that one. So this option is going to be available. So now you can see. So but we need to display this option is for what, right? So after this we are going to write some mail here. So it will be displayed like this. That means users will understand whenever I select this option is for mail. So but maybe I am displaying mail to the end user, but for database or server I want to save only one character. So then I can write value is equal to m. That means users, they can see it as mail, but whenever you submit to server or database, it is going to take only m. So this is for user point of view. This is for sending the form value. Similarly, let me add some name is equal to gender male, ID is equal to gender male. So similarly, so we are going to create one more option, value f, gender female, ID is also gender female, and for users it is going to be displayed like this, female. Now you can see, so the purpose of radio buttons is to select only one item among the list. So but here if you see there is a problem, it is going to allow you to select both the options at a time. Okay, so then if you want to avoid that, so you need to take same name for all the input elements. So then you can type gender and gender for the same. So then browser will understand these two options are for same input. That is the reason I said name can be duplicated, ID cannot be duplicated. So now if you observe this, if we select one, the second one will be cleared off. So this is how radio buttons are useful for us. Clear? Any questions? Okay, next we are going to display checkboxes. So these checkboxes will be useful for giving the option to the end user to select more than one from a list. So radio button will allow to select only one, but checkbox will allow to select more than one item. Suppose skill input type equal to checkbox as it is. You are going to maintain the same name for all input options. ID is optional, so I am not going to give the ID, so it will become lengthy now. So but actually you need to provide ID also, okay? So then you can see the value. So value is going to be something, and for user we can display something. So it's going to be like this. So value can be C. So for users we can display C++, but we can submit CPP. So Java we can display it like this, we can submit the same. So SQL we can submit SQL, Angular and Angular. So now you can see this. Among the list, users can select more than one item from the list, but radio button will allow you to select only one. That is the difference between radio button and checkboxes. And one more thing, so suppose if I refresh, you can see none of the option is selected by default in the radio buttons, right? Suppose whenever the form loaded, I want to look like this, so at least I can save user time, right? So whenever it is for female, they are going to click. Otherwise if it is male, they can skip and continue for next option, right? So at that time, in case if you want to make any element to be selected by default, so then we are going to write it as checked. Now you can see by default male will be selected. Suppose if you want female to be selected by default, so you can add an option checked. It will be like this. That means default selected. In the same scenario, so by default Java has to be selected. So here also we are going to mention it as checked. It will be looks like this. So by default we are giving an option to the end user, so that is, this option is by default selected. That is the advantage of checked attribute. Okay. Next, select list, or this can be also called as drop down list. This can be also called as drop down list. So suppose if I am going to offer city here, then we can use a tag called select. So here we are going to pass name and ID, that's optional. Name is equal to city, ID is equal to city, and inside that, so we are going to mention option. So here also we are going to mention what is the value for the option. So now you can see this. Suppose if I am going to mention Hyderabad, so the value can be same or different. There is no rule, it should be same, okay? Mumbai, MUM, Chennai, Pune, Delhi, DL. So like that. So this select list is also will allow user to select only one item among a huge list. So suppose if you have some 30 radio buttons, it is going to occupy the entire space, right? So that is the reason we are going to prefer the select list. So now you can see by default it will display like this. Users, they can change and they can select only one item at a time. And here also, if you want by default any item is going to be selected. By default first item is going to be selected, right? In place of that, if you want to select any specific item, then you can use an attribute called selected. So now Delhi will be selected by default when the form is loaded in the browser. So it's going to be like this. You need to add an attribute called selected. So this is going to be called as drop down list. So drop down list always will allow you to select one item from the list. The same drop down list will be converted to combo box. This can be changed to combo box. So let's see how it is going to be. Here you are going to mention it as multiple. So normally select will allow us to select one item, right? So this multiple will allow us to select more than one item at a time. So now you can see we can select by pressing Ctrl and mouse click. You can select more than one item like this. So this is going to be called as combo box. The same select list will be converted to combo box by adding the attribute called multiple. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So next one. So these input type reset submit are old version of HTML. In the latest version we got this button tag. So inside the button tag, so you can mention anything, suppose click me or something we can write. So here there are different types are there. Type is equal to reset, type is equal to submit, type is equal to button, anything you can use. And we have not seen what is the use of this reset button, right? So let's see how it is going to be. Whenever you are typing anything in the input elements, whenever we are typing anything in the input elements, so whenever you click on reset, these all will get cleared off. Okay, that is the purpose of that. Either that can be created by using input type is equal to reset, or else button type is equal to reset. Both will do the same purpose. You can see this. If I click on reset, it will get cleared off. That is the advantage of reset. So submit button is to submit the data. So button type is equal to submit. That's it. Submit or sign up or whatever you can write. So sign up. So whenever you click this, whatever the URL that we are going to mention inside the form. So form action is equal to, so some demo.html. So to this page your data will be submitted. And we can also mention what is the HTTP method, get method or post method. So we are going to mention it as post always. So why? Because whenever you are submitting the data, so it is going to be posting the data from one HTML page to another HTML page. So that is the use of submit button. In case if you want to create user defined button, then you can write input type is equal to button. There you can write some text like this. It's a normal button. It won't submit or it is not going to have any purpose. So you need to write your own what is the purpose of this button. Okay, and so we have one more HTML element. So generally that will be used for taking address or comments or feedback or something. So we are going to use a tag called text area. So then whenever you mention text area, it is going to be a multi-line text box. This is line 1 and this is line 2, and it will keep on incrementing. So you can scroll by using this. So it will switch to multiple lines. This can be also called as multi-line text box. Okay. So and the only problem with this particular radio button is, especially in the Chrome browser, if you are going to drag like this, it will disturb the existing form design. Okay. So that is a problem over Chrome browser. So next, we can also manage the default height and width of this particular text area. So here if you are going to pass columns, so it will decide what is the width and how many characters that you can type in a single text area. So normally it is taking 20 characters. So after that it is moving for the next line, right? So here you can mention 35. Then it will allow you to type 35 characters, you can see. 10. 20, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 35. After that it will take new line. So that is what the use of COLS attribute. So similarly, rows also we can mention how many rows you require. This will decide what is the height of the text area. Now you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After that, this is going to be a floating window. So we can able to scroll this and we can see the number of lines. So this is about text area. Okay, are we clear?